Today I'm going to be talking to Tristan Webb, who was the MD of Aspire. I say was because they've gone through a transitional phase of selling the business. So he's got a very interesting story and background, which I hope you'll all find interesting. And he's going to share that with us today. Welcome, Tristan. You know, I have a real problem saying Tristan. Something about my brain just doesn't.
My best mate still gets it wrong. Calls me all sorts. Trisha.
Yeah, well, yeah, I won't go that far, but I do struggle. So if I get it wrong, don't take it personal. Okay, so we bumped into each other a little while ago at some charity car event, and it's one of those moments for me when I meet someone, great timing. I meet someone and think, I don't know anything about that person, but actually they're going through quite an interesting stage in their life, and I wanted to know more. Hence, you're here today. So one of my first questions, I'm going to be trying to be very professional. I've got questions written down, which I normally don't do. I normally wing it. But your upbringing, what was it like?
Well, I don't know whether it's not what you'd think. I'm a council estate kid. I was actually brought up in the country. I'm a country boy from Shapwick, in between Wimborne and Blandford. And so not particularly well off as a family. First time I ever went abroad, we never really went on holiday, but I sailed there from Pool Yacht Club in a race at 17. And so that was my first experience of kind of travel. But that's not to say it was poor. I was just hanging out on my BMX and tearing around. I'm definitely an outdoors kid. I was not an indoors kid. I wasn't really a gamer. That was my brother's sort of world.
Yeah.
And I wasn't very academic. In fact, I was quite poor. GCSEs I was terrible at.
Yeah.
And I got halfway through a sixth form course as well, and then was like, this isn't working.
So books weren't your thing at the time?
No, not in the least.
It's quite funny.
Very physical. You wouldn't have put me in an office role eventually as how that was going to work out.
So similar to my upbringing. We weren't particularly, wealthy at all. Single parent. And my mum did everything on her own, bought our first house on her own. And I remember talking about BMX, you just triggered something. The first bike I had that she bought me, I remember she had to pay it up in order to buy it.
Yeah.
And I remember it was a shop that I used to have to go past every day to school. And I remember sometimes going early enough that I could go and just look at it through the window. And I knew it was the one that we'd bought because she went in, we picked it, and the guy had labelled it up. And I knew that bike was going to be mine eventually. And eventually Christmas came and it was my bike. So yeah, very, very similar. Very, very similar. One of the things we talked about was, which I was interested in, is how you ended up in insurance. So if you can explore for us how you came to be in insurance, about the car at such a young age, and also why you've ended up staying in insurance for so long.
Yeah, so I think that's quite an interesting story, and it's really different to probably how you'd go about it now, because back then, there was no external influences with regards to like career development, and you had your school careers development guys. It was just largely rubbish. They were trying to put me into the forces. That was, I think, all they knew how to do with me.
Yeah.
And so weirdly, I knew I wanted to work in an office because they wore suits. That was it. They just looked smart, and I thought that looks cool. I'd like to do that. And I know that sounds really shallow, but that's what I wanted to do. And I wanted an office career, but I didn't know anything about any of the other ranges of careers because I'd never had the exposure to what they might look like. Didn't have the internet, you didn't have influencers, you didn't have entrepreneurs, wasn't a thing.
Yeah.
It it didn't exist. So I went to night school and I learned to type. So I got my RSAs with a load of older ladies at night school, and I did an MS-DOS computing course because I
did that all off your own back.
I did that off my own back. I thought I want to be in an office, but I still didn't know what I wanted to do, and I just thought office junior. That's probably where I'll end up. And whilst I was doing that, I crashed my car down towards Sandbanks, or I was in a car accident, some minor accident. And I was insured with A-Plan and in Lower Parkstone. And Ian was the boss down there. I'm pretty sure he gave me a job just to shut me up because I was in all of the time pestering him about when it was going to be I loved my cars. And so it was really important to me. And so that got me my first job. I sort of explained then that I could work in the office. So he took a bit of a shot on me, which was great. But I think the reason I stayed and it worked so much is I was good at it quickly. And so I saw success early. So, and I'd never had that really. Of all the things I'd tried, I'd sort of not been particularly, I could do it, but it wasn't setting the world on fire. So it wasn't the fact that insurance particularly worked well for me. It's just that I got early success in it.
Right.
And then over the years, as you kind of stay with it, I've been pulled in all sorts of different directions. They want to take you to finance or recruitment or anything that was out of the career. And I've always kind of fallen back to the fact that I'm good at this as long as I stay in my lane.
Yeah.
Possibilities just kept opening up the way I went. So I kind of dotted through A plans and local high street brokers and got minor management, assistant management roles and that kind of thing. Worked for a big property broker. And it just kept going up and up and up. I ran a sales team at Pool at an insurance company that was there. And then Ian started A1 and I ended up working with A1 and I set up his property department. And then I ended up going to work for Marsh. So it kind of culminated in working for the biggest insurance broker in the world at the time, out of their London office, working in corporate client practice for the largest clients. So it's kind of, and that was always a goal because I was from the country. You always have that allure of what's the city like. And if you're in finance, to work in the city was a thing I think everybody kind of has to go and experience.
So what age were you when you hit the London scene?
I was early 30s.
Wow.
So yeah, up until then, I'd just bounced through local brokers, getting more and more management, minor management experience.
So how did you handle that at such, I mean, I say relatively young age, but I think to be at that level in London, biggest insurance broker in the world at 30, how was that?
I wish I had the naivety that I had then, because I was like, yeah, this is great. I'm just going to go straight in and do it. I had no idea what I didn't know.
Right.
And what was brilliant is that they were a spectacular company to work for in terms of inspirational management that had been around, and they knew I didn't need all of the technical expertise. I could bring that to the table.
Right.
They wanted that enthusiasm, that drive, and that sort of chat to be able to open up these larger doors. And I was just very lucky. I got into a very good team, and they were great. They were very supportive, and that definitely helped.
Right.
But yeah, the London thing was just an incredible period to go through.
So having had the experience at Marsh, what made you decide to start Aspire? You're in, let's face it, you're in a very comfortable position. I've done it myself. I've gone out of London and said, right, I'm going to go it on my own. Bonkers move. What made you make that jump? Because that's a huge jump. Yeah,
so that there's a couple of things that happened. I moved from Marsh to another big national broker that was still in London, but they allowed me to hot desk from an office in Bournemouth. Okay. So I didn't have to do London every day. Right. So I still got my taste of London, but was local. Yeah. Took a lot of the commute because I was commuting in at the time. So it was quite brutal from Branksome. And
we might have been on the same train.
Could have been, yeah. And it was sort of, it was always into the pubs afterwards to avoid the logjam on the tubes on the way out. And then you'd get home at about 11 and start again in the morning, in and out. So I got that. But career was still going very well and was poached by a large local broker. And the money was good. And I probably didn't research it as much as I should do. I probably was falling for the salary that was in there. Yeah. And they sat me down at a desk and went, go on. Do your thing. And I was like, what about the resources that was going to help me get there? And I just thought that they put so little into the support. I thought, I remember thinking, well, if I could do that, I'd do it myself. Yeah. And that was my light bulb moment. I thought, why am I doing this for myself? Yeah. And again, huge naivety in terms of what was ahead of me. Yeah. But I've always existed in a world where I performed or I was out. Like I'm from a development and a sales background, so there's a target, and you've got your parameters of acceptable performance that sit within that. Yeah. And if you didn't have a job. Yeah. And so within reason, but so I thought, well, how's that different? It probably isn't. Again, bit of naivety. It was massively different, but it was that gave me the confidence to just go. it can't be that hard. I'll go do it.
Yeah.
And I'd got proven performance history. So yeah, that's what took me down that route. And I'd stayed in touch with Ian, who was A1, because I'd set his property department up. And so he originally sat behind us as quite a silent involvement. The two businesses weren't connected, and we set it up independently on the promise that I wouldn't go near any of the property stuff, because obviously there was a bit of a conflict there. So that's the connection. Made it a bit easier.
So at what point at Aspire did you get to the point where you felt, you know what, I've really built something here?
Do you know, you said this to me. I still don't.
Really?
It doesn't work that way. And probably maybe in a year or two. I keep doing that. I pushed it down. When we started, Ian got me a lovely bottle of champagne, I might have said to you.
Yes.
And I was like, anyone can start a company.
Yeah.
And so I thought, no, I won't do that. Maybe when we hit the first trigger point, whatever that financial one was, we got to it and I was like, anyone could do that. And or maybe, first, second, third employee, whatever it was. I still don't. I feel like it's still got so much more to go.
It's not on the paper, so I'm going to go off script.
Yeah.
But you've triggered something there again, and I'm going to unpick it a little bit. I'm inherently bad, I think, at patting myself on the back. Do you ever pat yourself on the back? Do you ever reflect on where your journey to this point and go, I'm really proud of what I've done?
Things like this have helped me do that.
Right, okay.
I'm from a very performance-related background, and I'm always focused on what we didn't get. So I've learned to pat myself on the back in terms of the balancing act between, yes, we grew at this, that was great, but at the same time, you didn't sacrifice school pickups or drop-offs, and so I pat myself on the back for what I managed to cope. Everyone's journey through the process is different, and mine was very balancing family orientated elements, and so I was dead chuffed that none of that got missed whatsoever. No sports days, no Christmas shows, nothing.
That's pretty good.
And so those are good pats on the back, and the kids are all independent-ish. Not really, but they're on their way to independence now. And so, that makes it easier for you to kind of slip now back into much more of a driven, and you can put a lot more hours in. It's almost sad because they don't really want you to pick them up.
No. I mean, I just did a fatal sort of error. You said, I don't really pat myself that way, because I could feel that's something that I don't do. And I do think we should do it more. Not so much how great we are, but just an acknowledgement of our milestones. And I've often wondered, and I've looked at, shall we say, commercially successful people, and I've looked at them and thought, I wonder, do they know while they're on that journey that they're doing well, or do they just keep going and never acknowledge where they're at? And actually, sometimes I find myself, not that I'm massively commercially successful, because I'm not, but certainly if I look back at where we were 22 years ago, the reality of it is, we are
done all right.
Yeah, but we never sort of have that satisfied feeling. Do you feel satisfied?
No.
Why don't we feel satisfied?
Do you know what? I think a lot of it is a positive thing, and that's why I'm where I am. I've got 100 ideas for development now, even moving forward, that I haven't been able to implement because I haven't got the resources, or I haven't got the budget, or the time, or whatever that is. And so, and that's where I'm unsatisfied, because there is unresolved projects that could. I've lost count of the amount of times, by the way, that I've thought it's going to be an amazing thing. We were talking just before we set up, and then it wasn't. But I have so much idea for development. And I think that's why it's unsatisfied, because I haven't got a chance to do.
You haven't done everything.
I want to do.
Got you. That's awesome.
Yeah.
So we're going to move on to personal challenges and resilience. And you spoke very candidly with me about actually losing everything, ended up on your friend's sofa, and that those were some of the darkest moments. I'm more interested, not so much how that happened, but how you motivated yourself to get out of that situation and turn everything around. What made you keep going?
I think it would be easy to kind of retrospectively frame it around some events. The first thing is, I didn't believe that was reflective of me.
Okay.
And so I put almost too much stock in my value as a person around too smaller metrics. So the business success or the marriage success or whatever they were. And it was bigger than that. But I didn't know that at the time. I just knew that that wasn't me. And so I've got good screw you energy, and my kind of like, no, this is not right. This is not where I'm supposed to be. I just didn't feel like that was where I was supposed to be.
Wow.
And so I just dug in. And I think there's quite a lot of books written about different moments that change people's world. For me, it was about really just dogged consistency. I turned up every day. We'll get to it maybe later on, but I treated myself like an employee of the business. I worked the hours that I said I was going to work.
Yeah.
I didn't take the holidays that I said I was going to have. I did the same with the gym because I knew it was going to be physically exhausting, and I knew I needed to get that side of myself sorted out as well. And so, as boring as it sounds, I chose consistency.
Okay.
And I literally just slowly found out what worked and just kept showing up.
It sounds like you were, I mean, maybe I'm wrong, you were being quite hard on yourself.
Oh, totally. I made some terrible mistakes during that period. I wish I could have been softer, but I wouldn't have gone through the development that I had. I had CBT at the time, which still helps now in terms of when you're under pressure to kind of reframe things and not. There's a balance between, I think when you're quite driven, you take things quite personally.
Yeah.
That's why I really want the success of a particular deal or a particular thing, or even for a staff member, I'm really invested in them working out.
Yeah.
And so, but there's a tipping point where you're over invested. And you have got to step back and go, all right, if it doesn't work, it's not the end of the world. Sort of life still goes on.
Yeah.
And I struggled earlier with being over-invested because I put so much stock into that rebuild.
But where do you think that motivation comes from? Because I think for me, especially, shall we say, the younger generation now, motivation is a word that I do find is a common challenge for many people. Motivation. Where do you think you sound really self-motivating. I want to know where that comes from.
Well, you know what? This is such a. You mentioned before about courses that have influenced you.
Yeah.
And what was really interesting is there was a perception at one point that I wasn't motivated, but I really was. I was motivated by different things.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I've learned to do and must continue to do is that what motivates you changes so much. If you'd have asked 20, 30-year-old me that wanted to work in London, I wanted a 911, I wanted to work in the city, yeah. I wanted designer suits, that's what I wanted.
Nice stuff.
And that's cool. That's what I wanted then. And then if you'd have asked 30-year-old me, I wanted flexible working. I wanted to be able to get the kids to and from various swimming lessons take them on holidays and stuff like that. And at some point, you have to continually redraw what that success, what's driving you. Mm. So, now, for example, it would be about, well, okay, how can I help the kids on their journey? And how can I help the staff reach the levels of success that they get to? We've got Nanny that lives around the corner from us that's going to need some help at some point, and my parents are going to need some help at some point. Mm. So how can I spread myself out wide enough to help them? Now, that might be that I've got the skills to go and change a tap. I am not just relating this to financial goals and success, which is not a popular board decision, but sometimes it's about, no, what time can I give you to help you get there? And so from that perspective, I'm always trying to redraw what's coming up, what the next chapter looks like, and what I'm going to need in that chapter. And learning, and that is a learnt skill, it's not one I had, because at some point I was quite complacent in the growth of the business, and you can see it leveled off. And I say it leveled off, it grew at a much smaller rate. And that was because I was really quite content in my own bubble at that point. And I couldn't really see that any more of anything would be any better at that point. I was quite happy. Life was good. I can't really complain. And you wouldn't have motivated me with a 911 at that point, because I'd have gone,
Yeah.
Oh, yes.
Wow.
So I had to create friction, but not artificial friction, because I think I'm too intelligent to have gone, I don't really want that.
No.
Do you want a boat? But I needed to create something I really wanted.
Yeah.
And then so the kids are doing university now, when you're like, okay, so I'm helping them with their university.
So it's a focus you needed.
Yeah, but to redraw what's coming.
Yeah.
And how you might be valuable during what's coming up.
Mm.
And even now, if you were to look at your retirement plans, so you talk to an IFA and they'll talk to you about working backwards from what you want it to look like. And you think, well, all right, well, you could have a holiday in Spain every year if you want, or you can have a holiday in the Caribbean every year if you want. Which would you prefer? Would you like to? And what property would you like to live in? And so, but if you can start with what and work backwards, that's worked for me. And I'm quite good now, but only because I've spent a lot of time reading around the subject and getting as much information as I can, figuring out how I work, and that's it. That's how I optimize my performance, is to kind of figure out what's coming up and what's going to be valuable. And then it's important for me.
Wow. That's a lot of self-reflection there. And I don't often hear many people talk about knowing themselves. It's very interesting. If you could speak to yourself during that low moment, looking back, what would you say to yourself?
Well, we sort of touched on it earlier, but I was particularly hard on myself, and it didn't work.
Right.
And so that whole, you should have started earlier, you should have made another 10 calls, that didn't work.
No.
And so I should have been more supportive of the growth period. Right. You're not going to jump from A to D. No. You're going to go through B, C on the way. And so, you just slowly. And I did get there eventually, but I was quite hard on myself at the time.
So
and it was quite an emotional journey to do that. And I think it could have been a lot easier on myself if I hadn't done that. But then you say I'm quite introspective now. I think I am, because I did that. I got it wrong and I had to figure out what I was doing wrong.
It's chicken and egg, isn't it? It's almost, you needed to get through it to get that experience, to then be able to look back and say, if I was going to do it again, I'd say to myself, take it easy.
Yeah.
As opposed to, hammer it. Another interesting one. It's on a similar sort of vein, but you mentioned, you used a phrase when we talked previously about having a word with yourself when you can sense that you're spiraling. I really want to understand that more. I want to understand how I know when I'm spiraling, when someone close to me says, you're spiraling. But other than that, I won't generally know. But you sound as though you've got some sort of method of keeping yourself in check.
You see, depending on how close we work on how big a deal, people would say, I'm not sure how effective that is all the time.
Okay.
But I definitely will recognize the emotional side of things when I'm like, God damn it, come on, like, hold on a minute.
Right.
Does it really need that? And so I can spot if it's late in the day and I'm tired, for sure. I'm very easy at spotting tiredness.
Okay.
And I'm quite sensitive to tiredness.
Okay.
And so even if I've had a poor night's sleep for whatever reason, I'll very much I'm able to moderate the next day's activity. Sometimes you can't, you've got to do a presentation and it is what it is. You've got to go and deliver.
Yeah.
But if I'm able to, I'll modify the day to go, all right, well, you're a little bit sleep deprived, so you need to have a bit more of an admin heavy process today, or maybe take on less sort of cerebral processes.
Okay.
But I can spot the tiredness quite easily. I can spot the over-emotional quite easily. And I've got I'm a massive fan of this toolbox scenario. As we've grown, all staff are different in terms of how they sell, how they're motivated, how they succeed. And it's exactly the same with how you manage and regulate your own behavior and performance. And so we've mentioned before, I need the gym as an outlet. It's a great reset for me. My boys got the same mentality as well. It's like, if exams are stressing you out, you go and have a workout, and it helps. It doesn't solve the problem, but it just helps you press the reset.
Yeah.
And if you can't get to the gym, and COVID kind of did that, well, I don't try and assign my value to I go to the gym. It's no, I'll do something physical. So we'll go for a run or I'll go for a walk. I've recently when I worked from home, I was quite guilty of sat welded in front of the laptop. So now, rain or shine, I'll put a coat on and I go for a walk around the block at lunchtime.
Okay.
I've just, because I can't help but be competitive, I've just started picking up a rucksack and putting weighted plates in it and doing it. And so there's still an element of me that doesn't do it healthily and has to try and slow. I'm not perfect. I'm a work in progress.
Oh, my word.
But still, I have a physical outlet where I'm like, oh, okay, you've got to have a physical outlet.
Yeah.
And then I can spot those things coming. I've recently, I'm trying the Headspace app as well. So a little bit of meditation. Not very good at making it a habit. I'll maybe hit 2 or 3 times a week. I really want to make that a daily habit.
Okay.
And in order to make that a daily habit, I have to habit stack. So put it on top of when I'm doing something else.
Okay.
So it becomes an easy thing.
So you're mind blown a bit. You're very into self development and understanding yourself, geared towards performance.
Yeah, geared towards my own well-being. Really, I think I've learned that everything's connected. This whole work-life balance thing. If you're good at work, you come home, you're enthused, you're motivated, you're happy. It's good to be around. If you've had a terrible day at work, you can't compartmentalize it and still be that enthusiastic person. And that's okay, because you want to come home and share your problems with your family and they can give you their feedback and so on. So I've learned to optimize my own performance. I'm figuring out how best to extract the best out of me. And sometimes you can say, yesterday actually, yesterday was a terrible day. We didn't get achieved what we needed to get achieved, but I had a good workout. And so that was a win. And so you can tick off what wins. And in the evening, I had to do some DIY elements at home, and I fixed those things. That was fine. So now I do recognise those minor wins. Right. So in the whole day wasn't terrible. I had a poor work performance day, but I had 2 other successes that kind of make sure that the day was good. Yeah. So I spend quite a lot of time trying to make sure that I can extract the most out of me, and that means trying a lot of things. Some things work for me and some things don't work. And I'm just a fan of this toolbox scenario. So if any of the team are then saying, head's dropped, I've not hit target for a while, it happens. If they're generally a performer, and I've been in sales long enough to know that there's going to be highs and lows in it. It's not linear. I wish it was every month. That would be lovely and predictable. But I've got now better tools to help support them because I've been through it. And what works for me might not work for them, but I can give them 4 or 5 things to maybe look at and to try, rather than just a broad brush overview. I like to come at something from an actual, I've been in the trenches experience.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, you've covered so many points in that little chunk there. We're going to fast forward to now, the big one, the sale and letting go. And there's a lot of people that I know that are probably getting close to that point that the journey that you've been through. So this will be, quite some knowledge nuggets. So let's talk about the sale. What were the deciding factors and the tipping point that made you decide, actually, we're going to go for it. We're going to sell?
Well, we're part of a bigger group. And so I'd always intended or envisaged that it would eventually be swallowed, would be bought by the group.
Right.
And so it was never a legacy business. So it was never something I thought the kids were going to work in. And so from that perspective, that's why it's not called Tristan Insurance or Mackenzie Insurance or whatever it is. It's, it had a name that would be valuable, that didn't rely on me. Brand. And so from that perspective, as it grew, you'll notice that there are certain restrictions in what you're doing. And we were going to continue on this trajectory. And unless I invested more money myself or borrowed more money, which I'm quite risk averse as a person, I really, I'm not a risk taker at all. I am Mr. Safe. So when it comes to making financial decisions, probably because of losing things in the past, I'm very, very cautious. Yeah. And I had plenty of people who were prepared to put money in. as well. But I just didn't want to take that chance.
Just adds more pressure.
It just put more pressure on. So I was quite happy to say, no, we'll keep growing at the rate we'll go. So with that in mind, you could kind of see the trajectory that we were on. But also you weren't going to avoid change because the parent company was going to sell.
Right.
And so if change was your worry, well, tough.
Yeah.
That's going to change anyway. And change needed to happen. I'm actually a big fan of that. I'm a big, I back myself. I've always said paddle your own canoe, and I'm a big believer that I'll be okay because I've got the ability to work within a revised structure if that's needed.
Yeah.
So change was inevitable anyway. And I'd already got my head around the fact that at some point it was going to go. There was a lot of protection around the things that concerned me. So staff, people that you've invested your time and money in, they were all protected as part of the arrangement. So that took a lot of that worry off the table, which I'd have felt, that would have been a really big influencing factor. You could have doubled the money. And if that wasn't on the table, I've spent a lot of time and money
with those people.
Yeah, they're my friends as well as colleagues, and so that was taken off the table, which was great. The company that were doing it had a great name, and others have a reputation for kind of buying and stripping things out, and this wasn't one of those. So I thought, okay, well, I'm behind the brand, and I'm kind of ready for, like I said earlier, the kids are a bit more independent. I can throw myself into bigger projects. And I'm quite relishing the idea of having more resources, a wider spectrum of employees to kind of draw on their expertise if I get something complex on my desk. Yeah. So I'm quite excited about it. I would say we're in a transition period at the moment, and we don't really know until the dust has fully settled what that's going to look like.
For sure.
And you're going to feel anxiety about that. What that's going to look and feel like, and I have to have a word with myself and say, it's natural to feel a little bit anxious because I had secured my future was secure, and now my future's in other people's hands.
Yes,
but is it like if it didn't pan for whatever reason, if it didn't pan out, I've proven I can take something. When we started the business, it was me and a phone. There was no budget. It was me and a phone. I've got more than that now. So if we needed to do something else, something again, we could. And so I've got a sort of secure blanket that sits behind me that says, I want it to go in this direction. I'm happy for it to go in this direction.
For sure. I guess obviously the video is going to be in the public domain, so I'm slightly careful about what I ask, and don't answer anything that you don't ask, but it is a question that I did pose to you earlier. And I guess I'm interested both personally as well. I don't know whether I hate the word boss. I hate when anyone calls me boss, and I hate using the word boss. But ultimately, you were the MD of Aspire, and you, to a lot of degree, you called your own shots.
Yep.
How have you handled that change, that difference?
Again, it's a transition that we're going through at the moment. I'm getting used to weekly reporting that I didn't have to do, and projections that I didn't have to do, which they don't sit in I'm not particularly strong at those, so I'm learning. I'm developing that skill set. But I think, as I said, as I went back to Marsh years ago, I had a great management team around me. I didn't really dislike my boss at that time. In fact, he was quite inspirational in terms of sitting down with me when I was stuck, giving me ideas for how I can develop, because he came from the trenches.
Right.
So I think I can add a lot of value. I'm not a C-suite executive.
Right.
And I don't think I've met the team there. They're all great, and they're those inspirational characters.
Right.
So I'm quite lucky that they all seem good guys.
Awesome.
So, but in terms of the lack of control and the boss element, it's been odd. I've always treated myself like an employee of the business, and my team will say the same. I'd be saying, I can see you this morning. So I said to the team, look, I'm going to go to the gym beforehand, and then I'm going to go straight onto the meeting, and I'll make up the time at the end of the day. And they'll go, you don't need to do that, right? But I tell them what I'm doing. There's nothing hidden.
No.
And so so from that perspective, it's not a big transition. I wasn't one of those that would just clear off and go and play golf on a Friday afternoon.
Yeah.
No, I worked because we work Friday afternoons.
Yeah.
And all right, sometimes, you'll be flexible around that. If I've got a meeting in Poole and it's near where I want to go, I'll have my lunch hour and do that as my gym and then go back. There's that flexibility, but I don't think that'll change.
No.
So from that perspective, I don't think there's going to be that much change.
Right.
But it's more to do with how I even pay. I always paid myself a salary.
Yeah.
And I didn't really take big dividends and stuff like that. It was just, if I treat myself, I knew, again, I'm quite cautious. If I kept doing this and it was working, great, the trajectory will get there. Yeah.
And it sounds to me as though the culture that you're now in is not massively different to the culture you had before, in that, okay, you might have someone that you report to, but when during that process, you can either sit and have a meeting with someone that feels like you're part of a team and you're working together to get somewhere, or you can have a meeting where someone's telling you what to do, how to do it, and you feel like a subordinate. And it sounds to me like you've got the aforementioned.
Yeah, I don't react well. I don't react well. I've never reacted well. But if you tell me why, I'm happy to go try.
Okay.
So if you say, look, we've got this strategy, we want to try this, we think this is going to be the outcome, can you trial it for me? I'm great with that.
Okay.
That's my forte. If you say on the first side, we want it done this way, I'm like, no, you see, you got to tell me why that's important. But then again, that works well with me being a parent, because that works well with the kids. Don't tell them what to do. Tell them why what they're doing is important, and they'll respond better.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so that whole balance. So I think I've got that at the moment. That seems to be the case.
Excellent. Last point: future outlook and reflections. So the future. You've gone from managing a small team in Ringwood to influencing 500 people across a much larger organisation. Has that affected your sense of purpose?
No, I would say there is, like I said, an excitement about what's coming. I very much enjoy. You don't really make allowances for the fact that we've got older whilst we did this.
Yeah.
And that young, enthusiastic, ball of energy gained some quite useful skills over that 30 years of doing all different types of sales. And what's really useful is the environment that I cut my teeth on doesn't exist anymore for a lot of the younger employees that are on their way up and through. So things that we take for granted that we think are really straightforward, there's no sort of process to take the younger employees through. So having an exposure to be able to add that value to a lot more people, that was quite exciting. I quite like that idea.
Yeah.
You could put some bigger targets against my name and I can make more money, or we could increase 500 people's targets by 5%. And all of a sudden, that's worth a lot.
Yeah, for sure.
So the impact that you can have could be massive.
It's much greater.
But we'll see. I like I said, I kind of sat behind it all. There is an element of my identity that I tried not to attach to the business as I'm an MD. I'm the boss. I'm this. And I've always tried really hard not to be that person. If my team, I felt responsible to them for my performance. I still bring in clients, and if I don't, I feel like I let them down. And that's no different. So I hope that's the same.
Interesting. What's coming through? And again, I'm going off script on this one. What's coming through, Tristan, is a real sense of positivity, optimism, and just generally a positive outlook on everything that you're doing. Do you feel that?
Yeah. My wife would tell you I suffer from pronoia. I am the whole, everything's going to be brilliant. It's going to work out great. She's like, based on? Nothing whatsoever. Just very excited.
So do you go on that annoying slip into that annoying? Probably. Everything is great all the time.
Yeah, probably. It is hope for the best, prepare for the worst.
Right. Okay.
So I am the insurance man, and in my world, I see everything go wrong. That's what we do. I deal with all of the worst claims. You see a really, really wide, diverse range of businesses in what I do. So you can have a management consultant that you meet networking, so we'll go networking, we'll see quite a lot of people, and they can be really inspirational. They could come to you for their insurance. You think, God, they only turn over £20,000 a year. That's not particularly successful. And then you can find out afterwards that actually they sat on millions, they've had their success, and that this was a selection to turn over that much money. So I've learned not to be too judgmental about what that success looks like, and that success looks so different to so many different people that sit in there. And so whilst I am really enthusiastic about the future, I'm quite happy to put plans in place to make sure that if it's not, I've been through enough difficult times to realise it's not life ending. We'll figure out an alternative. And so my stepdaughter, had to work at a different location. She was feeling really anxious about working at this different location. And she was like, oh, it's terrible. I won't know how anything works. And, I won't know any of the people there. And I'm like, again, this is an element of CBT that pops in. I was like, no, yeah, it's true. But you also might know how it works. You might meet some great people there. There's a contrabalance to it. You might be right. It could be an absolute car crash. But also, might be brill, and probably the truth will end up somewhere in the middle. I think life's really thrown me that balance that I've kind of learned. It's not without. I'm not unguided. I'm not like blindly leaping forward. But I know that the balance. There'll be peaks. Set a high new business target. There'll be peaks and troughs in how you achieve that. There'll be months that are terrible and you just feel awful and you can't do it and everything you touch goes wrong. And then there'll be months when you're flying and.
So it's life experiences that you're leaning on, and that shaped you. And I have to say, we've coming close to the end of the chat, and it's been wonderful to hear your story. And actually, it's been even better to get that sense of that purposeful positivity based on the experiences you've had. So for me personally, thank you for sharing that. It's been really good. And I think I'm going to walk away learning something from this anyway. If no one else does, that's fine. But I personally have really enjoyed listening to you today.
Cheers. It's been great. I actually hadn't considered half of the elements of it because, as you say, you forge your path, and I know what I'm doing. And then somebody asks you a question, and you think, I've never been asked that before. No. And then I won't wing it. I'll sit down and have a think about what that answer is going to look like, and try and be authentic with the response. And it's been useful. It's been a great exercise for me to go through as well.
Excellent. Cheers. Thank you. Really enjoyed it.
Cool.